So today we are working on shortcuts to prove triangles congruent again. Remember that we had 5 ways to prove that triangles were congruent. Side, 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 angle, 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 side, hypotenuse, leg. Anything else would be not congruent. So on our first one, we have 2 sets of angles that are congruent. One here, and then here. Now we do need to mark that middle line as congruent because it's congruent to itself. And we're going to work it just like we did yesterday. How many angle pairs do we have that are congruent? We have 2, so I'm going to mark out everything that doesn't have 2 sets of angles that are congruent. And then we're looking at that side. Is it included between the 2 angles in one triangle or not? These are not, so this is angle, angle, side. For those of you who said that they were, you were looking in 2 different triangles. Make sure to cover up the extra triangle so you aren't getting confused by that. Our next one, we need to mark the line they share. So we have one set of sides as congruent, another set of sides that we marked as congruent because they share that side, and we have a right angle. If it's on one side, remember if it's making a line, it's on the other side as well. So we have one angle, and we do have a right angle, and we do have the side across from the right angle, so we have a hypotenuse and a leg. So this is HL, hypotenuse leg. Our next one, we have one set of sides congruent, and we have a set of angles that are congruent as well. What else can we mark? We can mark vertical angles. So now we have 2 sets of angles that are congruent to each other. That means that we can get rid of those 3. Now we need to look at the side. Is the side not being made by our 2 angles, or is it being made by our 2 angles, or not being made by our 2 angles? This side is outside of the 2 angles. It's not between them. So we have angle, angle, side. Our next one, we have one set of sides marked as congruent, second set of sides marked as congruent. What else can we mark as congruent? We can mark our vertical angles as congruent. So we have one set of angles, so we can mark off everything that doesn't have one set of angles. We don't have a right angle. And then, is that angle being made by our 2 sides? Is it included between our 2 sides? Yes, it is. So we have side, angle, side. Okay, next up, we need to mark what is given to us. The first one is that we have 2 segments that are perpendicular to each other. Remember that perpendicular means they intersect and make right angles. So segment AB and segment CD intersect and make right angles. I'm going to go ahead and put the right angle symbol on both sides. We know that segment AC and segment AD are congruent, so I'm going to put tick marks on those. And then we know that segment AB is congruent to itself because of the reflexive property. So again, we have one set of sides, second set of sides, and a right angle. So that means we have hypotenuse leg because AC and AD are the hypotenuse. And triangle ABC is congruent to triangle AC. BD. Next up, we're going to again mark the segment that is being shared. Segment PQ is congruent to itself. We know that PR is congruent to RS, so we're going to mark those. We know that RQ is congruent to SQ, so we're going to mark those. And all we have marked is sides, so we have side, side, side. And triangle PQR is congruent to triangle PQS. Next up, angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles, so we can mark those. Segment MN is congruent to segment PO. MN and PO. And we mark the line that is shared between them. So we know we don't have side, 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 because we don't have all sides. We know we only have one angle, so we know we don't have angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle. We do have a right angle, but we don't have the side across from the right angle, so we don't have HL. What we do have is side, angle, side, and triangle MNO is congruent to triangle PON. Yes, the congruent parts have to match up. So we had one tick mark, a right angle, and then two tick marks. We have to follow that same pattern. On the next one, go ahead and mark your vertical angles. Then we know that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. And we know that segment XY is congruent to segment VW. So we're going to mark those. So we again know that we don't have all three sides, so we can mark that out. We again this time know that we don't have a right angle, so we can mark HL out. And we have two angles marked as congruent, so we can mark out side, angle, side. So then we need to look at where our side is in relation to our angles. And our side is not being made by our angles, so we have angle, angle, side. And triangle XYZ is congruent to triangle VWZ. Make sure these letters are capitalized. Make sure you write triangle in front. And yes, the order matters. X had no marking. Then we went down a side that had a tick mark to an angle that had two arc marks to an angle that had one arc mark. Next up, we want to name all of the congruent parts. So first off, we're going to mark that side that's shared between them, and that is segment AD is congruent to segment AD. It's congruent to itself. And then we need our right angles. So angle ADB is congruent to angle ADC. And then we need our angles up here that are getting bisected by segment AD. So we'd have angle BAD is congruent to angle CAD. And again, we have two sets of angles marked and the side that is in between them. So we'd have angle, side, angle, and triangle BAD is congruent to triangle CAD. CAD. And if you name your angles correctly, all you should have to do is look at how you named your angles to name your triangles. On our next one, go ahead and mark your vertical angles, and that is angle RTX being congruent to angle STY. And we have two sets of sides that are congruent. So that's segment RT being congruent to segment ST, and segment XT being congruent to segment YT. And we have two sides including an angle, so we'd have side angle side, and triangle RTX is congruent to triangle STY. And last up, we know that segment PN is congruent to itself. Segment PN is congruent to segment NP. Now, these arrows do not mean congruent. They mean parallel. So what we actually know here is that segment PM is parallel to segment ON, and that segment OP is parallel to segment NM. This does not mean that those segments are congruent. It means that they are parallel, and it tells me information about angles. Remember that we had alternate interior angles when we had parallel lines that were intersected by a transversal, and that's what we are naming. We have angle OPN is congruent to angle NMNP, and angle ONP is congruent to angle MPN. So again, we have two sets of angles marked as congruent, and we have the side that is being made by those two angles, which gives us angle side angle, and triangle OPN is congruent to triangle MNP. Make sure you have this one marked down. You will want to refer back to this one, and remember that those arrows mean parallel and not congruent.